Hello, friends. Welcome back to Family Twist. It's Corey. Today, we're joined by Rich Boerner, a radio lifer turned author whose life story took a sharp turn thanks to a single photo and a tiny star in an old address book. Rich grew up a devoted only child in a small Long Island apartment, raised by a mom who kept the trains running with love and grit. The story about his father was simple and tidy. Then, grief opened a door. While cleaning out his mom's things, a Polaroid slipped loose, and the clue on the page next to it changed everything. Rich is a pro on both sides of the mic, so you're going to hear him think in real time. Follow the thread and let the quiet do some work. We talk about the 1970s stigma of not having a dad, the college counselor who told him he deserved more than name, rank, and serial number. Buckle up for a conversation people would absolutely eavesdrop on at a coffee shop. Hey, Rich, welcome to the Family Twist podcast.
Well, thank you for having me, Corey. Appreciate you.
We're thrilled to have you. And we're going to talk about your book in depth. But before we get into that, I was trying to think what are some interesting first questions that we just haven't jumped in with people? And obviously this is a DNA Family Secrets podcast. But What was childhood like for little Rich?
Childhood to me there was a limited amount of resources we had, and we were not, we could have been indigent, but we had family that helped support us. It was just me and my mom, and we lived in a little 3-room apartment that was a converted 2-family house, but it was owned by my aunt and uncle. So they charged my mom a ridiculously low rent to make sure that she could live and buy food and things like that. And, we didn't live extravagant. We never went anywhere. We never traveled. If we went somewhere, it was a car trip on Long Island, and you don't know when you're a kid. You don't know a difference, and I grew up in a neighborhood that was filled, working class neighborhood. So there wasn't a lot of people who were, we vacationed in Maui. Oh, we went to Europe. So there wasn't a whole lot of comparison problem there. So there was a little bit of this bubble of, oh, wow, this is really cool. Everything's really cool here. A group of friends. Now, the difference that wasn't cool was I didn't have a father. And this being the 1970s, that was a different deal then. So that was something you wanted to hide as much as you could. It was because you were different. And again, different. We go back. Differences still. Sometimes it's difficult, but they were definitely not celebrated in the 1970s. Yeah, that was always a challenge for me because I would always ask my mom what the story was about who was my father, and she had what I called her prisoner of war story. It was like 3 sentences over and over. It was a man named Alan Scott from Milwaukee. We had a relationship. As soon as he found out I was pregnant, he used to visit on business to New York. And as soon as we found out I was pregnant, he told me he had a family and he could never see me again. And that was it. I was like, well, it's plausible. Given the time and everything else, totally plausible. But there was not another detail beyond that. So I was like, what do I tell the other kids? Just tell them it didn't work out for your mom and dad. Okay, well, that's what I did. And, went along life like that. So, it's not a handicap for certain. It's just, we all have this for different things and different reasons. When you feel a little bit of I'm different, I'm a little bit of an outsider, it's a challenge when you're a kid. Definitely not something that kept me from succeeding or doing anything. That's your question.
And it being the time that it was, even, if you would have to ask your mother, well, how can we maybe find him?
Yeah, no. Literally, if she said he's gone and he hasn't contacted me, and the only thing was, yellow pages and telephones. And it was like, at that point, why? It's on top of the fact we didn't travel anywhere. So it wasn't like, well, we can hop on JetBlue and get to Milwaukee in no time flat. It was like, no, we just don't go. My first plane ride I paid for it myself right as in my senior year of college from my own money. And it was, a real discount airline. I went to Florida with a friend, let's go to spring break. Oh my God, I can afford this because I've been working, and got on a plane. And, it's the difference between my kids. They've been on, because my side of the family still lives in New York, and they've been on planes since they were babies. So that's nothing to them. They're, okay, yeah. But I always say to them, do you realize how exciting it was for me at 22 years old? It's like, this is like a cool theme park ride, and then once I had kids, I was like, oh God, this is terrifying. What if something happens,
Yeah.
Anyway.
Kendall and I took our last plane ride together a handful of years ago, and it was actually meeting his baby sister in person for the first time in New Orleans. And it was
Wow.
January, flying back to Boston. There was one runway open. We had to circle several times. This is the only time I'd ever been on a flight where people are actually using the vomit bags
Oh,
audibly.
wow. Wow.
So,
Yeah.
we land. It's not the smoothest landing or whatever, but it's like, okay, we're good. And I kind of looked at me and he said, I'm never flying again.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
No, no, no.
he has stuck
Yeah.
to it.
Yeah. Well, good.
I hate it in general. So
Mm-hmm.
that was like the straw that broke the camel's back. I was like, I'm done. I'm finished.
And I think we made it worse for each other because, traveling together, it's like, I'm sure we're both thinking like, well, what happens if something happens and who's going to take care of our dogs?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I was getting
Yeah.
such crazy anxiety around flying with Kendall that we were both a wreck, and then once I started taking a few trips by myself, I slowly started, I still don't love it, and I don't think anybody loves it,
Yeah.
especially these days. Those 1960s Pan Am, luxury flights are a way thing in the past, but
Yeah.
slowly but surely I was able to let that anxiety go. But yeah, who knows? We're going to have to drug him with milk like Mr. T and the A-Team to get him to time.
It used to be for infants or when they're younger, so they're not screaming all the way. The nighttime cough medicine is good.
Yeah.
And they slept the whole 5 hours.
Right. We've all been on flights where that has not been the case with babies for sure.
Yeah. Oh, no. We know. There's just, like I said, that is a shared experience for many people. Not everyone, obviously, but many people, especially in America. You don't remember the easy flights. But the other ones are ingrained in your brain because it's like, oh my God, it's either torture or I'm going to die. Torture or I'm going to die. Torture, I'm going to die. So yeah, I mean, it's challenging. Flying is challenging these days. So I don't blame you, Kendall.
Yeah, I realize how irrational I am about this fear, but it still doesn't make me not scare Corey greatly. I don't blame him. I would not want to fly with me either. Or make me sit in a different part of the plane,
Yeah, they would have the Kendall section.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
For the rest of you who are neurotic.
In a straight jacket.
Yeah.
As long as it's padded, right?
Yeah. Right.
Kind of like one of those moon bounces at the county fair. It's like, wow, don't get caught in the seam because it feels like you can't breathe when you're caught in the seam of those things. But just as long as you're not caught in the seam, you're good.
Right.
Oh, I'll try to remember that next time.
Don't get caught in the seam.
So, Rich, I think for many of us, our parents are the first people that we learn to trust and trust everything that they say and do. What point did you start to question that maybe you weren't getting the complete story?
Well, I guess I probably questioned it when getting to tween and teen years and whatnot, but I just didn't want to deal with that. And plus, I loved my mom so much. I didn't want to cause her anxiety, pain, anything else like that. Then when I got to college, I double majored in communications and psychology. I always loved psych. I was a huge Jung fan, and I was definitely into how the world actually operates and why people think finding answers. My counselor for psych, we had to do weekly meetings. I guess he would call them sessions, but it wasn't like I would book sessions with a psychologist, but we had to do this program. I had to do that with him, and we're talking, and he said, you're an adult now, and if this is really bugging you, you deserve an answer more than just name, rank, and serial number. So probably about 2 months of that. And I said, okay, I'm going to basically book a Sunday afternoon with my mom. And I did. I booked a Sunday afternoon. I said, hey, we just talk about it. And she complied, said, yeah, we'll be there. And we went through conversation and got into the uncomfortable stuff. And she gave me the name, rank, and serial number. And I said, there has to be more. Tell me about before. How'd you meet this guy? Did he work with the company you were working with? I mean, did he work at another company? And then the tears started. And I was finally, I don't know, it might have been 5 minutes of that, but it felt like 4 hours of that type of interrogation without me. I wasn't trying, getting mean, but I was getting frustrated. And then I finally said, it's enough. And I said, I said, I love you, Mom. And I walked over and gave her a hug. I said, I'll find out another day. And I walked out. So I kind of shelved it. I was never on a mission to find out, because I was on a mission to live a life and become a success and do what I love to do, which at that point was radio, and to be successful there and have fun because I really liked it. I always did really well in school and all the rest. It was just because I had an excellent memory. If I was in a room with somebody and they spoke, I would remember it for a couple of weeks, like almost verbatim word. So when a test came, I got this. Again, that doesn't exist anymore. And I didn't think much about it at all. And now we've moved into the 80s and 90s. I had a single mom, and we move forward, and I'm going through life. I get married, I get a job. I'm now working in radio in Florida, in Orlando. And it's time, my firstborn comes, and it's a lot of stress on my now ex-wife and me. It's a lot of stress, and I want my mom to come down and be with us in Florida. I make the mistake of not discussing that in front of the issue with my ex. Big mistake. And I know that was a mistake. And because I didn't want my ex to feel like I was saying, you can't handle this. But it was just overwhelming. And my mom was getting ready to retire. She had me in her 30s at that point, in the 70s. So that was late in life. She was in her 60s at this point. That went south really fast. Well, it was good. She was on board. She was coming. And then that went south really fast. And I'm giving you a synopsis of the book here anyway. So it ended up not working out. There was some confrontation, some things I had to go do to say, no, you can't come, which was misery. At that point, I ended up getting a job in San Francisco. Things were working really well in Orlando. So industry-wise, I was getting noticed. And I just said, you can't come right now. And then I bounced from San Francisco to LA. During that point, my mom contracted ovarian cancer. And it was serious. It was bad. Ultimately, she ended up not making it. So when I'm cleaning out 3 months after she passed, because she had lived with my aunt and uncle, so I didn't have to go immediately get the apartment cleaned out. After burying her, 3 months later, I come back and I'm going through all her stuff. And the stuff I found in her private, it wasn't like she was a mobster. The letters she wrote and the letters she had back, she was a huge baseball fan, from like big names, Yogi Berra, Vin Scully, and Sparky Anderson, all big names back then. She had letters written to them, but they had written back to, and I was like, why do I not know about this? And then there were other letters to trying to get my aunt, her younger sister, connect her aunt to a roller derby star in Brooklyn. And it was just a while. And then there was another set of letters that were kind of love letters. And I was like, oh my God. And I had to get through to the end. And when I got to the end, I was like, oh, okay. Not my dad. But again, all this stuff never spoken. Then I finally finish all that. And I'm like, I'm worn. I'm exhausted. I'm like, oh my God, this has kind of written like all these new chapters for my book, for the narrative in my head. And then I open up her little private, it was a little, the address book, right? And everybody in there, I know. There was only a few male names. My mom never dated, it was always just work and me. And I'm looking through and I'm like, oh, I know the few male names in there are like, she went to high school with him. They're friends from the neighborhood, this, that. And then I open up one page and a Polaroid falls out. And the Polaroid that falls out is a person I know. And I've known my whole life. And next to that person's name in there, it says Pickwick Motor Lodge, Valentine's Day, the year I was born, with a star next to it. That's 9 months before I was born. Actually, a little bit more than 9 months before I was born. And I'm just like, and I look at the person, I'm like, I look like this person. And I'm also, I'm a type 1 diabetic, which I was diagnosed, as a child. This person was the only type 1 diabetic that I knew. And I felt like the world's dumbest detective at that point. You know what I mean? So, but the thought is, I was like, does everybody know? Am I the only idiot? So I started asking. Besides, after sitting there, I always likened it to, at the point earlier, there had been the Kevin Costner Robin Hood movie. And the trailer to it had an arrow that looked like it hit you in the forehead. Like, I said, it's like, boom. I was like, I just sat there for like probably 30 minutes, like going, what now? What now? Because this person also had a family, right? So it made sense. Her original story, this person did have a family. And it meant that I had siblings or half siblings. And I was like, what do I do? So that's how I discovered who my father was. And then the ensuing part of, I ultimately connected with one of my siblings. Of the three, two of them were troubled, and I didn't really want to bring that into my life. That took another decade.
Was this discovery, did that have anything to do with the ending of your marriage?
My marriage ended a few years after that. And that was, and anybody who's been in, kudos to my ex. She's a good person. It didn't work for us. And we got married. When we got married, we were young. I don't mean baby young, but we were young, and, I was definitely immature, even for my age, young, you know what I mean? And we leaned on each other because we had issues and narratives we had painted growing up. And then ultimately, when living together, it just didn't work right anymore. So, yeah, I mean, no, that happened. The divorce happened almost 6 years after my mom passed. But, again, anybody who's been through something like that is, unless there's an incident that causes it, usually it's like, it probably could have ended before then.
Mm-hmm.
But we had kids. And I was like, I don't want to do this. The one thing I didn't want to do was, to me, that was a failure. Divorce was a failure in my brain there. And I had to get to the point of, we did many therapists. We went through multiple therapists, and it was just not going to work. I was like, I can't believe this. This doesn't fit in my narrative. I was like, first I get this from my mom, and now I get this. What is going on? I have a book written here of like how I'm going to show everybody that I'm cool and normal and everything else. And life has other plans. You have to learn to go with the flow in life. Unless it's taking you over the Niagara Falls, swim with the flow and stop trying to create your own. Yeah. That was all part of that. One of the things I said in the discovery is, we had one child at that point, and I was an only child, and we got a cat. I'm like, oh my God, something else is in my space. What's going on? So everything was major for me of adding to there. And my ex wanted a second, and I was like, I'm open to it, but in no rush. But after going through burying my mom and doing all that stuff, I was like, okay, I'm on board now, because I want our eldest to have somebody to help, because they'll have two people that they have to go through this with. And I don't want them to be alone. That also didn't ring very well, because my ex was like, you're not alone. I'm like, but I said, you don't understand. I don't mean alone like you're not helping and you're not here and you're not together. It's just different when you're attached. You're the familial attachment to it. So the thing about going with the flow of life too, and the story is, once I found that out and I knew I had siblings, there was credit to my sister, who, I won't say she was relentless, but she was sporadically persistent in trying to connect, because I didn't know, but she knew. In fact, she knew, because of how I knew this man, there was an event we were at all together. After that event, which she was at, she said her mother and father didn't talk because my mom and I came over to the table, and she had been at the event. And she said, I'm at this event and we're talking. So they're at the event and she's talking to one of the other executive wives. And she said, I'm standing there and my dad, didn't take great care of his diabetes, is over at the bar. And then I see the dad I knew when I was 6 walk up to him, shake his hand and pat him on the back. And my jaw drops. And the other exec's wife turns around and looks and goes, oh, sweetheart, you're going to need some drinks tonight.
Oh.
So she was like, there was silence at the table for a long time there, and silence in the car ride home, because her and her husband had gone with her father and her mother. And she went back like a week later and to confront him. And they had a screaming match, and he wouldn't admit to anything. And finally, he walked out and said, "Kiddo, sometimes you're too smart for your own damn good." And he slammed the door and walked out. So she knew. And then when my mom died, we had a wake, a traditional wake. He was in Puerto Rico with his wife on vacation the week it happened, and she came to represent the family. And so I had only heard about I'd heard about all three of them, but I'd only heard about the older two sisters who had a lot of problems growing up. There was police reports and, drugs and things like, and again, they were troubled. They were troubled. And she comes and talks to me. I'm like, she's cool. How'd she get so cool? And she's just going on and on about my mom and all the rest. And she said, I just had a little boy, and I hope that we can have the type of relationship that I saw that you two guys had. So after I find the picture 3 months later, I'm like, oh, and I get back from finding the picture, and a week later, a letter arrives from her saying, "Hey, I just wanted to remind you that if you ever need to talk, I'm here," and and going on. And I'm like, she knows, but what do I do? So I talked to my family. They said, well, there's still a lot going on, and there's a backstory to me and him too that's in the book that is, makes it obvious why I wouldn't immediately just run and connect. And I just wrote her a generic one back. Sure, it'd be great to talk in the future and everything else. I didn't want to close the door. It's the late 90s. We're still writing letters. And off it goes. And then nothing after that. I kept that letter. On my work desk, where you sit down and do stuff, or you sit with your laptop. It was there. Every place we moved to, everything else, that letter stayed there. I was like, someday. So I tried like 5 years later writing to her, and she had moved. So I got it reached out. Damn it. So then I'm sitting there, and flash forward now, it's a decade later, and I'm doing a podcast with a friend of mine, and just two guys and a mic, and it's we're trying to be morning show guys. That's what we knew. Not a great podcast, but we're having fun. It's just for fun. We're not trying to monetize. And he comes over one day, and he's like, I go, "What do you got today, dude?" I said, "I'm so busy. I don't have anything. What are we going to do?" And he goes, "I don't have anything either. I've been slammed." I said, "Well, this weekend's my mom's death date, and I can tell you about the comedy I created in the funeral parlor trying to distract myself." And he's like, "Oh my God, it's my dad's death." So we do a death date show, and how people will hide from the pain by creating comedy and whatnot. The day after we record that show, out of the blue, I get an email from my sister. The email comes in, and she's like, "I'm not sure if I Googled you. I'm not sure if this is really you," and everything else. "If it is, my son is in high school now." And so I guess it was more than 10 years. It was, my son is in high school now, and he is in communications, and he needs to interview somebody who's in the industry. And if it is you, it would be great if he could interview you. I was like, whoa. So I emailed back, "Yeah, of course. I'd love you. Tell your son, yeah, we can set this up, and I'll set up an interview and everything else." But at the bottom of her, she wrote, "There's so much more to talk about." I write back to her, and at the bottom, I go, "Yes, there is so much more to talk about." So I send the email. 5 minutes later, an email appears. "Great, fantastic. He's excited. We're going to do this and everything." Yes, and if there is so much more to talk. Like, we went back and forth like 4 or 5 times, but there's so much more to talk about in these emails. And finally, I sent an email to her. I said, "Look, if there's so much more to talk about is the relationship between your father and my mother, I know." And I sent it to her. I said, "If you want to talk, I'm here." And I sent it to her. Now there was like 30 minutes. I'm like, maybe that was a mistake. Maybe that was a mistake. Email comes back. First words in the email are, it's like 3 lines. "Holy shit, you can end the word." And she goes, "I can't believe it. Tears are streaming down my face." It's this long, long email of just, "Oh my, I have a brother. I can't believe it."
That's part 1 with Rich Boerner. We went from 3 little rooms on Long Island to a Polaroid, a starred Valentine's entry, and a brand new understanding of what family might be. In part 2, we pick up at the moment the past writes back. A letter that sat on Rich's desk for more than a decade turns into an email that says there is so much more to talk about. You're going to hear how he connected with a sister who already knew, how anger gave way to empathy, why both of his parents now rest in the same cemetery, and how he turned the whole journey into an audiobook by walking into his studio at 1 a.m. and speaking it into existence. We also dig into the song that scored his healing, Peter Gabriel's Red Rain, and his advice for anyone ready to tell their story out loud. Rich's book is The Not So Only Child. We will link to all the editions in the show notes. See you in part 2. And remember, family secrets are the ultimate plot twist. The Family Twist podcast is presented by Savoir Faire Marketing Communications and produced by How the Cow Ate the Cabbage, LLC.